classic one is also illegal or unlawful financial support. Has anybody ever read, I think it's chapter 12 of the Truth Report from Iceland about the collapse of the Icelandic banks? And that was clearly, all of those banks were engaged in giving out loans, a percentage of which had to be used to buy shares in the bank that was giving the loan in the first instance. And that was common practice. It was reported in Newsweek, I think, at the beginning of March 2008, that Counterfeit was in effect bankrupt. But it was continuing trading and business. And the whole issue between the two governments, the three governments, the Dutch, the British and the Icelandic government right now, is the FSA asked Counterfeit to place a deposit with the Bank of England to cover deposits that were hemorrhaging out of the UK to support the continued share price manipulation of Counterfeit Bank, because many of the shares are being pledged as in margin positions, and as the share price were to go down, it would have a devastating impact. But the shares are about to be called by the bank where they're held as collateral on a margin. Counterfeit can't afford that, so they need money to lend to the customer who's got them pledged against another transaction so that the shares aren't called. Market manipulation, market abuse. Galleon, the piece about Galleon that should be relevant and should resonate with you is the information. Where did it come from? What was the business of your firm with Galleon? Did Galleon have a trading relationship with you of any sorts? Did you have any, as a consultancy company, did you engage with Galleon? What about the transactions you presently have sat on your books at the time he's arrested? Existing relationships on others where there's some kind of cross-contamination, because there's 26 people arrested, and some of them very senior in different parts. Very senior, former Goldman's guy, senior consultancy people. What about your future transactions? How do you manage these risks? And the encouraging point is, particularly with the European House, people do want to manage these risks. They don't want to say it's got nothing to do with us. It's got a lot to do with you. You're very, very answerable to what's in the media, because the information's available to you. You're expected, your regulator expects you to use it. And the final one, as you know, in the markets that are difficult right now and have been for some time, Goldman's regularly called 5% of their poor performers. I think it's called doing God's work. But your friends lose their job. Okay, and notwithstanding whether they were a good worker or not, they're still your friend, and you have this empathy, this sympathy, because he's married, he has 3 kids, and he has private school fees to pay, and he can't get another job right now. So you give him a tip. And often people who have tips, they have this real feel-good thing about them. Say, look how clever and smart I am, look how life's good for me, and Michael, you should share some of this. So I'll tell you about it as well. And also, there's the other point that the collective group, if we all have equal amount of vulnerability and exposure, we feel more secure and happy in that. Again, back to policing days, there was a major investigation into the flying squad in East London for corruption, and I never worked there. There was an story once that they would maybe ask you to help somebody to sort out a parking ticket. It's a £40 parking ticket. You know, can you just sort something out and actually make that disappear? Not the most heinous crime, but when you do that, you've crossed a line, and now they have you in their circle. They've totally corrupted you, and they're going to go out and they're going to help people commit an armed robbery, theoretically, or they'll let the armed robbery take place. And in the primary getaway car, I mean, I'm not trying to give you a lesson in armed robbery or anything, that'd be very wrong of me, but ordinarily you have a primary getaway car that takes you from the scene of the crime to a designated spot where there's a secondary getaway car, because the police are looking for the primary getaway car, because the public said, that's the car they all jumped into with their balaclavas and their guns. So they go to a scene and there's a secondary getaway car. The proper armed robber burns the primary getaway car to destroy all the evidence. The corrupt armed robber who's in, well, is there such a thing as a corrupt armed robber? The armed robber who's in bed engaged with a corrupt police officer leaves a bag of cash in the back seat for the team in the primary getaway car. Now, if you've got the wrong person in your car when you turn up at the scene of the crime, you're in trouble. Can you take the cash? Will you get arrested? If you've already corrupted him with a parking ticket, you own him. So you have to be careful of what's taking place for your staff and how people are being used and abused. You have to think about this. If you want a cultural change, you have to think about it in the delivery of your training. Tax evasion as well, and again, it's not really a market abuse, the insider trading piece, but you know, again, I've disclosed upon this. I've had people in the organisation I work for, they've had their own offshore setup, Nevis, Isle of Man, trust, discretionary trust, but then you get behind it, the discretion is actually it's your money. They're set up really, and there's quite a lot of expense involved. Let's think about it. I can go and set up a company in the UK, with shares in my own name, right, not bearer shares, for £50. So why am I going to go to Nevis to employ some nominees and then to the Isle of Man to have a trust company just to buy and sell shares in the UK? I'm doing that so that I can avoid paying capital gain on the profits of the sales of those shares. So it's not market abuse, but it is money laundering. The point being on that was within a ring where basically they were all part of trading US equities. It's a very small universe of people who trade US equities in London. And they were looking for primary and looking also to be invited to take part in primary and secondary offerings. If you're at the tax evasion and you've gone through that level of, if you like, sinister conduct, how close are you to also abusing the market or insider trading? Let's go back to the parking ticket, to the armed robbery. It's just not a quantum leap. It's a very small step, I'd hasten to add. So there are many instances of money laundering in the equity markets, and these crimes are linked to the predicate crime, often committed by regulated market participants. Note to self, fixed slide. And the proceeds are sometimes laundered through those very same products that generate the crime in the first instance. That's for later questions. And that's me. And thanks very, very much for listening to me. If you enjoyed what you've heard, I do weddings, bar mitzvahs, anniversaries and birthdays. Thanks very much.